Hello guys, if you enjoy creepy stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. It was mid-January, and I was covering an overnight shift at the gas station, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. I didn't mind. Overtime pay was good, and the place was usually dead this late. I had worked here long enough to know the routine, stay behind the counter, half-watch the security monitors, count the minutes until sunrise. And outside, the storm was already making its presence known. Sheets of rain hammered against the pavement, pooling in uneven puddles near the pumps. The wind was picking up too, shrieking against the glass doors in long, hollow gusts. They were calling for a major storm later in the night, but at this rate, it felt like it had already arrived. An hour in, I grabbed my raincoat and stepped outside to secure anything that could get tossed around by the wind. Trash cans, loose signs, the windshield squeegees, small things, but if the storm got bad enough, even small things could turn dangerous. That's when I saw him. Not far from the station, on the edge of the street, a man was pacing. He had no umbrella, no hood, just a long coat that clung to his body, completely soaked through. He walked in slow, tight circles, head down, shoulders stiff. I lingered for a moment, watching him through the rain. Maybe he was waiting for a ride. Maybe his car had broken down. Either way, he didn't seem interested in coming inside. I finished locking things down and headed back in, shaking off the rain. 2 hours passed. The storm worsened. Thunder rolled in thick, growling waves, rattling the windows with every burst. Wind howled through the parking lot, slamming against the glass doors so violently that at one point they nearly flew open. I had to rush over and throw the bolt lock in place before the storm tore them off their hinges. I moved to the storage room in the back, away from the rattling windows, and waited. Then, through the chaos of the storm, I heard something else, a dull, rhythmic bang from the front doors. I froze. At first I thought it was the wind, but then it came again. Steady, forceful. Someone was out there. Heart hammering, I stepped out of the storage room and looked across the empty sales floor. There, through the glass doors, I saw him. The same man, still soaking wet, his dark coat dripping onto the pavement. His face was pale, eyes hollow, lips slightly parted like he wasn't entirely there. His fists pounded against the glass again. I hesitated. Every instinct in me screamed to leave the doors locked. But what if he needed help? What if his car had broken down somewhere, and I was his only option? I moved forward, flipping the bolt lock and pulling the door open. He staggered inside without a word. Water pooled beneath him as he walked, his drenched clothes leaving slick, heavy footprints. But he didn't thank me, didn't acknowledge me at all. Instead, he just started pacing, back and forth, like he was still out in the rain, looping the same tight circles over and over. I watched him uneasily. "Hey, you all right?" No answer. "Do you need me to call someone?" Nothing, just the sound of his wet shoes dragging across the tile. Then I noticed his hands. His knuckles were torn open. Deep gashes ran across his skin. Blood smeared across his fingers in dark streaks. The wounds looked fresh, like he had been hitting something hard. My stomach twisted. Slowly I backed toward the front desk, reaching for the phone. If he was in trouble, I needed to get him help. If he was dangerous, I needed the cops here now. As soon as I touched the phone, he stopped. His head snapped toward me, eyes locking onto mine. For the first time, I saw something flicker behind that empty stare. Anger. "Don't..." The word was quiet, cold. I hesitated, hand hovering over the receiver. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. The storm outside roared against the building, shaking the windows, rattling the doors. Then, just as suddenly as he had stopped, he started pacing again. I didn't move, didn't breathe. He kept walking, his soaked jacket dragging behind him. The sound of his footsteps filled the empty station, a slow, deliberate rhythm against the tile. I weighed my options. Running was risky. I'd have to get the doors unlocked and make it to my car before he caught up. Calling the cops might set him off. Fighting, out of the question, so I did nothing. I just waited. 20 minutes passed, the longest 20 minutes of my life. Then, without a word, he stopped pacing. He turned, looked at me one last time, and walked to the door. He reached up, slid the bolt lock open, something I hadn't even realized he knew was there, and stepped back out into the storm. I watched him go. For several seconds, I just stood there, trying to convince myself that it was over. Then I grabbed the phone and called the cops. It took them over half an hour to arrive. When they did, the man was long gone. No footprints, no trace of where he had gone. The next morning, when the storm finally passed, I saw something on the news. A woman had gone missing the night before. She had left work at 11 p.m. and never made it home. Her car was found abandoned on the side of the highway. The driver's side door had been left open. No blood, no sign of a struggle, just gone. I thought about the man, about his hands, about what he might have used them for. The cops never found him. They never found the woman either. Maybe I was just connecting two things that had nothing to do with each other. Maybe. But that night still haunts me, because I can't stop thinking about one thing. When he looked at me, when I reached for the phone, he knew. He knew what I was thinking, and for those few seconds, I truly believed that if I had made the wrong move, I wouldn't have made it out either. This is our second story. Watch this full story, Thousand Don't to Forget subscribe. The storm had turned the city into a drowning world of shadows and rushing water. I had just finished a late shift, 1 a.m., exhausted, barely keeping my eyes open. Working security meant my hours were all over the place, and by now, I was used to driving home half asleep. Tonight, though, something felt off. Maybe it was the storm. Heavy rain lashed against my windshield, turning the road ahead into a shimmering, distorted blur. Water pooled in the gutters, spilling onto the streets in slow, creeping waves. Streetlights flickered, their glow struggling against the darkness. I should have taken the main roads. Instead, I stuck to my usual route, smaller, quieter streets that weaved through the outskirts of town. It was a habit, muscle memory. The main roads weren't busy, but I just wasn't thinking. Then, I saw it. Up ahead, the road disappeared beneath a stretch of water. I slowed to a stop, gripping the wheel. The rain was making it impossible to tell how deep the flooding was. It could have been a few inches, could have been several feet. I wasn't about to risk it. With a sigh, I put the car in reverse, preparing to turn around. That's when my dashboard screamed at me. The collision warning alarm blared, a frantic, high-pitched beeping. My stomach twisted. I hit the brakes and looked over my shoulder. A car, right behind me, less than 2 feet from my bumper. I hadn't seen anyone on this road the entire drive. Not one pair of headlights, not one moving vehicle. And yet, somehow, someone was there, and their lights were off. A chill crawled up my spine. For a long moment, I just sat there, gripping the wheel, waiting for them to move. Maybe they had made the same mistake I had. Maybe they saw the flood and were trying to turn around too. But they didn't move. They didn't back up. They just sat there. The rain pounded against the roof, drowning out everything except the sound of my heartbeat hammering in my ears. I flicked my hazard lights on. Nothing. I honked. Once, twice. The echoes vanished into the storm, then their door opened. A man stepped out. Dark clothing, hood pulled low over his face. He moved slowly, deliberately, like he had all the time in the world. He walked straight to my window and knocked. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. He knocked again. I didn't roll the window down, didn't speak. Something in my gut was screaming at me to stay still, to keep the doors locked, to not engage. He didn't say anything, didn't motion for help. He just stood there, waiting. I forced my car into drive, inching forward toward the water, testing the flood to see if I could maybe make it across. The man followed. Step for step, he moved alongside my window, not frantic, not desperate, just watching. At this point, I thought maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was confused. The way he moved, the way he just stood there in the storm, it didn't feel normal. Then, a sudden sharp knock on the other side of my car. I snapped my head around. Another man, dressed just like the first, and behind him, another dark figure moving closer. My blood turned to ice. I had seconds. I slammed the car into reverse, jerking the wheel hard, trying to spin myself back around. The tires slipped. For 3 long seconds, I felt nothing but weightlessness. No grip, no traction. My car skidded toward the flood, the water surging closer and closer. Then somehow, the wheels caught. I tore the wheel in the opposite direction. the back of my car fishtailing as I spun around. My headlights swept across the figures, illuminating them just for a second. They didn't chase me. They didn't run. They just stood there, watching. I floored it, my tires kicking up water as I sped away. I didn't stop, not even when I reached the main roads, not even when the city lights reappeared. I didn't breathe until I was halfway home, my hands still locked in a death grip around the wheel. The second I was safe, I called the cops. They went to check the scene. The car was still there, parked right at the flood's edge. But the men? Gone. The cops ran the plates, expecting to find some local driver. Instead, they traced it back to a dealership. Hundreds of miles away, stolen, months ago. No fingerprints, no sign of anyone. I don't know what they wanted. I don't know what would have happened if I had rolled down my window, but I do know one thing. I wasn't supposed to get away. I've always loved thunderstorms, the raw power, the flashes of lightning illuminating the sky, the deep rolling thunder. There was something calming about it. My 6-year-old son had inherited that same love. Anytime a storm rolled in, he'd beg me to sit outside with him and watch it from our backyard gazebo. That night, in the sweltering heat of a Florida summer, the storm arrived like an old friend. The first flash of lightning lit up the living room, and before the thunder even finished rumbling, my son was on his feet. "Let's go outside," he said excitedly. I smiled, grabbed my drink, and followed him. The backyard was already soaked when we ran to the gazebo, the rain coming down in thick sheets. We huddled under the roof, laughing as the wind sprayed us with mist. It was a tradition. Out here, under the safety of the gazebo, we could listen to the sky roar, watch the lightning split the horizon, and feel small beneath the storm's might. I turned on the fire pit, letting its soft glow flicker across the rain-slicked wood. The storm was getting stronger now. The time between lightning and thunder was shrinking. Soon, the sky flashed so frequently it felt like a slow strobe light, momentarily lighting up the entire backyard, including the thick woods at the edge of the property. Then my son gasped. "Dad," he whispered, pointing toward the trees. "Someone's out there." A cold wave of unease settled over me. I turned toward the backyard, scanning the darkness. The rain was too heavy, making everything beyond the gazebo a blur. "Where?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "By the woods," he said, voice small. I saw someone standing there. Lightning flashed. For a split second, the entire backyard was bathed in white light, and I saw it. A figure, motionless, standing just at the tree line. The light disappeared, plunging everything into darkness again. My heart pounded as I strained my eyes, waiting for the next flash. Another bolt struck the sky. This time, nothing. The figure was gone. I swallowed hard, forcing a calm expression. "Go inside," I told my son. "Turn on the backyard lights." He obeyed without hesitation, darting through the rain toward the house. I stayed under the gazebo, eyes locked on the woods, waiting. A few seconds later, the floodlights clicked on, bathing the yard in a harsh white glow. I squinted, searching every inch of the grass, the trees, the edges of the fence. Empty. I stood there for a long moment, the storm raging around me, trying to convince myself that we had imagined it, that it was just a shadow, a trick of the light, a shape made by bending branches. But deep down, I knew better. I locked the doors behind me when I went inside, my hands a little unsteady. My son was already telling my wife what had happened. I tried to brush it off, told her I saw the person leave, just to ease her worries. She asked if it was a man or a woman. "A woman," I lied. It sounded less threatening. The three of us curled up on the couch, watching a movie as the storm pounded against the house. Eventually, it was my son's bedtime. My wife tucked him in, kissing his forehead before rejoining me in the living room. I tried to relax, I really did, but something wasn't right. At some point, I got up to turn off the outside lights, the backyard, the front yard, the side floodlights. One by one, the house grew darker, lit only by the occasional lightning strike. Then I heard it. "Dad!" A small, trembling voice from the hallway. I turned. My son stood outside his bedroom, pale as a sheet. "There's someone at my window." I felt my stomach drop. My wife and I exchanged a look before I rushed toward his room. I stood in the doorway, heart hammering, staring at the glass, waiting for the next lightning strike. Flash, nothing. But I believed him. "Stay inside," I told them. "Lock the doors." My wife grabbed my arm. "Don't go out there." I kissed her forehead, grabbed a baseball bat from the closet, and stepped outside. The storm swallowed me instantly. Rain pelted my face. The wind howled. Lightning burned across the sky in violent white streaks, lighting up the yard in fractured, flickering frames. I checked the gazebo first. Empty. Under the deck, nothing. I forced myself forward, scanning every corner of the backyard. The trees loomed ahead, their branches swaying violently. Then I turned toward the side of the house and froze. A figure stood at the edge of the wall, just a face, half hidden behind the house, peering out, watching me. Lightning flashed again. In that split second, I saw eyes, not normal eyes, not panicked, not guilty, just empty. A deep, unsettling hollowness. I screamed, gripping the bat, and charged toward the corner, but by the time I turned it, gone. I spun around, frantically scanning the yard. The rain pounded against my skin, the floodlights illuminating every inch of grass. Nothing. The storm howled. I was alone. I backed up toward the house, my grip on the bat tightening. Every instinct screamed at me to keep watching, to not look away. I locked the doors behind me the second I stepped inside. "It's fine," I lied to my wife. "He's gone." She didn't believe me. Neither did I. That night my son slept in our bed. I kept the bat beside me, eyes locked on the bedroom door, listening, for the rain, for the wind, for the sound of footsteps just outside the window. Thanks for watching. If you made it to the end, let me know. What would you have done in this situation? Would you have called the cops sooner, run, stayed put? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more creepy stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload.